Hello, my name's Dave Erickson Pearson, and this is my story about attending the UN Special Session on Disarmament in 1978. Um, I was 26 years old and living in Chicago, but the event was at the UN in New York. So um, it was a time of great tension in the world in the early, well, all throughout the Cold War. Um, a lot of anxiety about uh, nuclear proliferation. Uh, this was actually before they started a campaign in the US to freeze nuclear weapons to try to limit the number of nuclear weapons, but there was a lot of anxiety. Um, when I was a kid, we'd have to do drills in case of bomb attacks to go hide under your desk and stuff, which was ridiculous because that would never do the job. But I was a student, and a group of us from Chicago decided there was going to be this special session of the UN General Assembly in New York, there were a lot of basically activists and just concerned citizens from all over the world who decided they wanted to were invited to go to New York and first of all, be a presence to try and push pressure a little bit the world's leaders who were meeting to take this seriously and push towards a reduction in nuclear weapons, because there was just a lot of tension in the world at that time between especially the US and the Soviet Union, then Soviet Union. So a group of us from Chicago met downtown on whatever day, I think it was a Thursday night or something, downtown, and hopped on a bus and rode all night across it was about a 15-hour bus ride to New York.
Wow.
And there were a couple of bus loads from Chicago, and there were bus loads from all over the country coming, and people actually coming from all over the world to meet and pressure, well, just try and be a presence. We all got to New York, and a group of us stayed in the YMCA. It was the cheapest. We were all students, so we stayed in the cheapest place we could find, which was a YMCA hotel near the Port Authority bus terminal. And this was before they had done a whole lot of renovation and improvement in New York. And it was a dive. And we learned after we got there that a Dutch visitor who had been murdered in the hotel the week before. Oh. So we were nervous. There were drug dealers in the halls. Even the guys who would go down the hall to the communal restrooms would go in pairs. Yeah. This was not a very glamorous thing to do. But we spent that first night, and then up the next morning we also made an effort to find a safer place for the next night that we were and we were able to transfer to another place. But we went and gathered on the Upper East Side and heard speeches from a number of famous activists, speakers. The one I remember the most was he'd been a chaplain at Yale University, William Sloane Coffin, was a very famous preacher, and speaking and encouraging us to think about this and to be engaged about um, the need to pressure our governments. Certainly Americans, we had a great opportunity in a representative system. And most of the Europeans that were visiting had great opportunity, but at the time, the people of the Soviet Union, they may have wanted disarmament, but they didn't have a whole lot of say in their system. So we just would hope for the best. And not too many of them could come. They weren't given the opportunity. This was 11 years before the Berlin Wall came down. So this was definitely a time when people from Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union were not allowed to travel freely to the West. But we all gathered in the streets at a park and marched probably 10 blocks over to another park area close to the United Nations. And the thing that I remember most about this actual demonstration, other than the many signs that people had, calling on the world's leaders to push towards peaceful resolution of our differences and to reduce the numbers of nuclear weapons, which could, both U.S. and Russia were capable of destroying each other, hundreds of times. And what is the purpose of that? You can only destroy the world once.
Yeah.
And thankfully that's happened. But the thing that I remember the most at this event was just the range of people from so many different countries. There were a lot of people from various European countries, but I also remember a group of Buddhist monks who were from Japan, and they had been at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and which were the only two cities that had ever experienced a nuclear explosion. And this was 30 years after those bombs, so most of these, but they were very clear on the impact of nuclear terror and destruction on a city. So they had us do about a 10-minute time of silence, and they called it a die-in, and everybody was asked to just lay down on the ground. And in total silence, except for these monks beating a couple of drums very slowly, like a death thing.
Oh.
And oh my gosh, it was just a remarkable experience, imagining the impact of nuclear war on everyone. So that was a very memorable weekend.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The funny thing about it was, it also happened to be, my wife was also along on the trip, and it happened to be our second wedding anniversary. So for our wedding anniversary, we had a sundae, ice cream sundae, in the bus terminal, the Port Authority bus terminal. Not a very fancy or dramatic way to celebrate, but the whole weekend was a very memorable way. And then back on the 15-hour bus ride back to Chicago. So it was a time in the world that I'm glad has largely passed. We still have a lot of tensions, but they tend to be a lot more regional and a lot less risky to the whole world. There's a periodical called the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, and they used to have a clock, a doomsday clock, and if it hit midnight, that meant we were going to be the threat of nuclear war was really high. And in this time it was about, I think it had started at 11:30 p.m. and whenever they started this in the early 60s, but by the time, I think it was about 5 till midnight. And so it was scary,
Yeah.
you know, a scary time.
Anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.